So today's topic is going to be 10 ways, or maybe more ways, but 10 ways how to have a more interesting life. Okay. Um, my first point that I did my little homework, like a little bit of research, and according to my research, one way to lead an interesting life is to stop being lazy. Let's talk about that, okay? So, does anybody agree or disagree? Does laziness have anything to do with having an interesting life or not having an interesting life? So, why don't we start with go hard? Go hard, go.
Anna, I want to say I agree with you because when you lazy, you can do nothing else. When you want to be freedom, have an interesting life, the first point you have to think the positive for everything.
By nature, God made us lazy. Well, yes. By nature, it's easier to not work hard, right? That's another thing about having interesting life. You have to embrace all the good stuff that you have and all the negative stuff. You don't pay attention to it, and then you hire other people to help you with that. So anyways, going back to my story. So my colleague, who is a CPA, who works with me with my clients. I'm a financial planner. If anybody doesn't know this yet, I'm a financial planner by profession. That's my first profession, besides many other professions, but that's my first profession for 25 years. Invited me to an event in New York City. I live in Westchester County, which is about 45 minutes outside of New York City. I'm like, I have to get dressed. I have to put makeup on. I have to drive myself to the city, then I have to find parking, then I have to pay $50 for parking, then I have to walk to this guy's office. Do I really want to do all this? And I'm thinking to myself, he's a wise man, because he's like, I'll send an Uber after you. He's like, I'm going to send a taxi after you. I'm like, oh, yes, if you're sending Uber, I'm definitely coming. I'm thinking, good. I can get in a taxi, I'll do my work, I'll do my meeting, my emails, everything else, perfect. All I have to do is just get dressed and go. So the day comes, this was I think last Wednesday. The day comes, I'm working and I look at the clock, it's 5 o'clock. The Uber is supposed to come at 6. I'm like, I call him, I'm like, Mark, where's the Uber? I'm like, where's my Uber? You said you were sending an Uber after me, right? And I was like, you take the Uber and I'll pay for it. I'm like, forget it. My point is, when he made my life easier, I said yes to the invitation. If I felt that it was going to be more work, I'm inclined to say no to the invitation, right? Yeah. So anyway, long story short, I ended up driving myself there, and it was so fun because I am so happy I went there, because I met lots of very interesting people. In fact, I got 30 people wanting to come to Armenia with me this summer. So I was like, wow, I'm so glad I went, because if I didn't go, all these 30 people that I met, all Americans from Peru and Panama and Argentina, and New York City is full of like immigrants. It was awesome. We always have to overcome that laziness. We all have it in us. And in order to have more interesting life, we always have to try to push a little bit harder and just say, just get it done. Let's just go. Because usually when I do something, I always end up saying, wow, I'm so glad I did it. So that was my first point about laziness. According to my research, a second way to have more interesting life is to try to, when you're meeting people, to try to remember their names and their stories. So tell me a little bit more about that. What is your opinion about this point that I'm trying to make?
Well, that's an interesting point. I think there is a little truth into that. I guess when you remember people's names, you call them by name, even though you may have met them one time or whatever, and they realize that you remember their name, it makes them feel special. That it makes them feel like they really, who doesn't like to be called by their name, right? Who doesn't like to get, oh, happy birthday, Anna, or happy birthday? So
because your name is the most special thing to your ears. Like it's like a song to your ears, right? When people call your name. I go in and there's like 30 people there, and I don't know their names. And I was trying to meet every single one of them, and I was trying to remember their names. And then one of the guys had this very interesting name, is Tanzania. And I was like, wow, how am I going to remember this name? It's like, and I tried a couple of times and I made mistakes and we laughed about it. But according to my research, in order to make your life more interesting is you have to have more meaningful relationships, I think. The fact about trying to remember the people's names and their stories is not just for the heck of it. And I think because if you make an effort to get to know somebody, you have a deeper relationship with them, and you're showing to them that you're making an effort to get to know them. For me as a person, it's been always very interesting in my work, my professional life. I deal with people and families, and it was always so interesting for me to hear about people's like background and how did they achieve their success. And they went, a lot of them went from nothing to very, very successful people. And it was, for me, it was very, very interesting to hear their stories. And I think if you hear somebody's story, you cannot forget about them, you cannot forget them. And for me, I don't know about you guys, it's easier for me to remember faces, it's harder to remember names. It's like an effort, it's an extra effort that you have to make to remember the names. The next topic that I have is it says, in order to have an interesting life, you should take a class and learn something new. How appropriate is this, right?
I always like to learn something new. I always, because I'm very a friendly person in my life. I'm a very positive person. The first thing when you want to remember, people have to remember you, you have to have a nice smile. When you want to be interesting, the second part for me, interesting, when you want to be interesting in your, when you're going like event or something, you have some of these different people, these new people, when you meet with them the first time, you have to know a lot of things in your head. Like I'm not talking about news, I'm talking about interesting topics. Like I have a notebook, like special notebook for this person. Like that's the, for me is memory. I write down this time I meet with this person. That was this part in a conversation was for me is very interesting. That's, I always like do something new.
I'm sorry to interject, but it's really, really important because I basically do something very similar. When I meet people, I don't have a notebook, I have my phone. So I put it in my phone, their information, and then under the notes section, I will say, met in such and such time. And like, let's say, if introduced me to Hasmik, I'm gonna say, Gohar introduced me to Hasmik. I have write something interesting that stayed with me about that person, because trust me, you end up having, let's say, 5,000 people in your contacts, or 10 Hasmiks or 5 Gohars, and then I'm gonna think to myself, which is which. So that's why it's very important. Anything that sticks with you, you write down about that person.
I'm sorry.
About having an interesting life, which is, it says to become a spy, to grow as an observer, which means to study interesting people and read about interesting people's biographies, which is basically what Gohar, you were saying, right? So when you're meeting people, if they're interesting, and again, some people love history, like I happen to like history, I love history, and I'm always curious, about people's lives and how things happen and why, and one thing leads to the other, and almost never, nothing happens for, everything happens for a reason, as they say, right? So, one way to be more interesting in your life and have a more interesting life is to become very observant about your surroundings, about people. Pay attention to the little things. Like sometimes people, it happens all the time. They're very outwardly like happy, and but inside there's a lot going on you don't even know, and they're like almost like a fire ready to be, like a flame is ready to like burn, because God forbid you say something wrong, this happy person turns into this completely different person. But if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't notice these things. Number 6 about having an interesting life is to travel somewhere interesting. Tell us more about your opinion.
Let me tell you, I absolutely agree. Traveling is something that makes your life incredibly interesting in terms of meeting new people, learning new cultures, becoming more open and more adaptive, more tolerant. We Armenians have very, very rich history. We have an amazing art, culture. We really, really are trying to, sometimes even forcing, unfortunately, to show our culture, our history, our traditions to others, to a foreign language, to foreign people. Believe me, learning about other cultures, when I used to have a training center, our first slogan was, the key to peace is mutual understanding. The key to mutual understanding is cross-cultural communication. And the key to cross-cultural communication is knowledge. So more you know about other cultures, more communicative you are about them, and more tolerant. You start realizing, why do people behave like that? Why do people have these traditions, these cultures? Why some people are very aggressive, some of them are very tolerant. This is very, very interesting. Also, traveling gives you a lot of information, not only about other cultures, but there's so much to learn from others. Even if you go to the third country, go to the developing country, wherever, people are people all over the world. And coming back to your first and second points, Anna, I just missed it. I would like to add something.
Please.
To me, I never pay attention to the names, because when I meet the person, there is an unbelievable virtual dialogue. I should feel them with my soul. If I don't feel them inside, I'm not just talking blah, 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 and just departing and, I met someone, he may be helpful. Never. I'm getting inside of him. And to me, one of the best and the most important things in human relationship is being organic, natural, and sincere. If I want smile, I will definitely smile. If I don't want smile, I will still smile, not because this is a fake smile, because it motivates me and the other person to be more cheerful. And the interesting thing is that when I started, let me tell you this and I'm done. When I started my training center, we start with English language tuition as we do it now. And there was something wrong with this. Women were coming, they were registering, and I had a feeling like, there should be something behind that. And fortunately, I want to thank the creator for this ability. I can feel people very, very quickly. I mean, when I speak to someone, I can absolutely know what's going on inside, what's his main problems, what does he need. And for some reason, I always try to think, what can I give to him? And then only what can I take from him? And believe me, the law of synergy works always. What is synergy? Synergy means 1 plus 2 is not 3. 1 plus 2 is 4. And this is another thing we can discuss. This is a great theory. When you help someone, now you have yours, his isn't yours for you, and his isn't yours for him, which is also 4. What I'm saying that there is an interesting transformation of energy. When you talk to people, trying to help them, it absolutely comes back to you. And the women were coming to start English. I was talking to them, asking questions. Suddenly, they were starting crying. You know what? Most of them had so many personal problems that they decided to come to learn English and to change their lives. Mutual trust is very important in interpersonal communication. If I speak to you and I realize that you really don't care for me, for heaven's sake, even if you smile, even if you give me presents, we never will ever become friends, or we will never have good relationship.
That's a very, very good point, Christina Jan, because I want to add something else to that. Many times in our professions, we're in situations where meeting people and saying hello. Do you know how many times I know that somebody's talking to me, but their eyes are somewhere else? Like their attention is into some other things, or his mind is he or she's thinking about other things. Why are you bothering saying hello to me? That small talk. Either try to do it properly or don't do it at all, right? Because the worst thing in the world is that you're talking to somebody and you're feeling like, okay, this person is not paying attention. It's like the worst, most awful feeling. Goodbye from Westchester, from Yerevan, from Brooklyn, from Houston, Texas, from Los Angeles, California. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Just going it.
Bye. See you.
Hadi hoşça.